UFC Fight Night Qatar, Tsarukyan versus Hooker takes place this weekend, and I'm going to go through the entire card, starting with the early prelims, ending with the main event, giving my prediction and breakdown for every single fight on the card, and this one is stacked. I'm going to start straight away with the early prelim opener of Marek Buljo versus Denzel Freeman. I'm going to go with Denzel Freeman here. The majority of people are taking Marek Buljo, the Polish guy, but I'm going to take Denzel Freeman. I think Marek Buljo is just a little bit untested, and the way that his career's been planned out so far, he's 6-0 undefeated compared to Denzel Freeman, who's 6-1, lost a split decision at one point. But Marek Buljo's fought nobody good whatsoever, and in certain parts of outside of America, listen, I'm not saying that Denzel Freeman is extremely tested against really good heavyweights on the regional scene, because the heavyweight division outside the UFC is absolutely terrible. It is. It's awful. But Marek Buljo hasn't fought anyone with a winning record, with a good record, at least. And I know his name is Aspland, the guy who won on the Contender Series and is in the UFC and got a KO victory on the Contender Series really nastily. At least Denzel Freeman has a dominant performance win over him via using his grappling to a TKO to ground and pound. He's got KO power on the feet as well, and he can wrestle, and he's big. Marek Buljo's in better shape, but from regional to UFC, sometimes at heavyweight, we see these guys from certain promotions, we see their physique melt a little bit, whereas Denzel Freeman, he's got power on the feet. He's got a wrestling background, a solid wrestling background. And I think that's going to be all the difference here. And he's got 20 pounds on Marek Buljo as well. Or Budlo. Sorry, he's got 20 pounds on Marek Budlo. So I'm going to go with Denzel Freeman. He's fought a couple of undefeated heavyweights. He's fought Aspland, who made his way to the UFC after losing to Denzel Freeman and got a KO on the Contender Series, as I said. So I just think he's more proven. And I'm going to go with Denzel Freeman getting this one done. But before we move on, up the card, use code GURU at prizepicks.com. New users, if they place $5, they get $50 in lineups when they sign up using code GURU. And this week on UFC Qatar, I'm going to go with Nurullo Aliyev to fight for more than 2.5 total rounds against Shamrock. I'm also going to go with Ian Garry to fight for more than 2.5 total rounds against Bilal Muhammad. I actually think that one's going to go to a decision. And I'm going to go with Shamil the Blob Gaziev to fight for more than 1.5 rounds against Sergey Spivak. 20 gets you 60 with those three. And that's what I think is going to go down on this card. So use code GURU at prizepicks.com. New users, $5 gets you $50 to use in lineups when you use code GURU. Let's get back to the card of UFC Qatar. Nurullo Aliyev versus Shamrock. Shem, I'm sorry, dude. It's Nurullo Aliyev in your debut. It's tough, okay? It's a tough one. I know Shamrock. Listen, me and Shamrock go way back. And Jesus Christ, this is just disrespect. He's only mixed. There's no need to fire shots like this at Shem. You know what I mean? But I was so looking forward to Shamrock versus Anshul Jabli. So I could be like, you're watching a Shem show and all of this. I'm an elite grappler. He's a grappler. I'm an elite grappler. But, Shem, I was watching the last fight and you're not beating Nurullo Aliyev, man. Do I think he should be as big of an underdog as he is? No, he's talented and he's good and he's from a great gym. Pimlich's gym has a lot of good fighters. They're probably the best. No, they are the best gym in the UK. Next Gen is the best gym in the UK. No way around it. However, Nurullo Aliyev's really good. He beat Joe Solecki. And I know Joe Solecki's not all that, but Shem, your last opponent was not all that. It was way too close. It wasn't a split decision. I have no idea what the fuck the judges were seeing there, but it was extremely competitive in moments. And that guy took it on short notice. And he's shit. And I know you're not shit. However, you need to be looking a tad bit better than that. Maybe he's coming into his prime. And this is what we're going to see here. But Nurullo Aliyev, fair play, he had a close one with Rafael Alves. I think he was 22 years old coming into the UFC facing Rafael Alves in his debut, who has given problems to Damir Ismagulov and other sound, even against Drew Dober, he was kind of having some moments against him before he got hit with that body shot, and that was a better Drew Dober. And Alves is prime for a Dober KO loss, if you know what I'm saying. So I'm going to go against Shamrock in his debut. This is a tough fucking debut, man. I wish it was more like an Anshul Jabli or someone else at the bottom of the lightweight division just to get our toes wet a little bit, you know what I mean? Smoke a couple people here and there. And then we get some momentum. And then we start looking towards these matchups. But I'm going to go with Nurullo Aliyev. I do think there's a chance at an upset here. But I think Nurullo Aliyev should be the favorite. Nearly 2-1. Just under 2-1 is what I would say. He is good. And he's young. And he's had time off now. And he's only 24. And he's going to get better and better. And he looked good on the Contender Series. He looked good against Joe Solecki, who's not the best. Listen, Joe Solecki's not the best. And I also think this is going to a decision. This is going to be a 3-round decision. I just can see Nurullo Aliyev winning some of the scrambles. And do I think he might get stuck in a guillotine at one point or nearly caught in a sub at one point and maybe get his back taken for a round? Yeah, so I think it's going to be a 29-28 close decision. But I was watching back some Shamrock fights and I was thinking, man, Nurullo's going to take this to a tad level above where these guys are taking it. I think the guy was like 12-5 that fought Shem, and he was kind of shit. Like he'd lost 4 out of his last 9 fights or something like that. And that just don't look good to me. And I got a reputation of a good prediction person on YouTube to uphold, because as you can tell by the main and co-main event picks I made last fight card, I've only got the greatest of picks. Okay? So I'm going to go with Nurullo Aliyev, and I'm going to hope that Shamrock gets on the mat. You're watching the Shem show. He's a grappler. I'm an elite grappler. I hope there's going to be some edits. I hope he pulls it off. Big upset win right into the deep end. Give him some big names. I'm Team Shamrock, but I'm also logical and think this might be a bit much for a debut. So I'm going to go with Nurullo Aliyev. I will say that Shamrock ain't the same height as him. He's going to be a bit taller, but yeah, I'm going to go with Nurullo Aliyev getting this one done. But we'll see. I think 29-28, very close decision to Nurullo Aliyev. Prove me wrong. Shem, please. We move on. Ismail Nurdiev versus Ryan Loder. I'm going to go with Ismail Nurdiev to beat Ryan Loder. Thank God it finally loaded in. No pun intended. Yeah, it's just fucking comedy hour over here. But I'm going to go with Ismail Nurdiev. I think he's better. Park In-young did beat him in his last fight, and he's had some stinky ones in the UFC, I understand as well. But this is his second go in the UFC. Did he lose to Park In-young? But Park In-young did all right against Dikram Aliskerov. This is what I'm talking about. Bakoev easily handling Ryan Loder has not aged well for Ryan Loder. A tough fought-out victory against Robert Valentin has not aged well for Ryan Loder, because a lot of people seem to be making pretty easy work of Valentin. So I'm going to go towards Ismail Nurdiev. I'm going to go towards Ismail Nurdiev getting this one done. I think he's a bit more well-rounded, a bit more experienced. I mean, you can see that just by the records. 8-2 for Ryan Loder. Does have a great wrestling background, don't get me wrong, but American wrestlers. I know I didn't say that in the heavyweight bout, but heavyweight's a little bit different. When things are a bit more skilled, you know, Nurdiev's had welterweight bouts. You know, he's been a welterweight. That's lighter man skill right there, coming up to middleweight division. So he's going to be a little bit smaller, but I don't think Loder's going to just destroy him in the grappling here. I think that in terms of damage and the shots like elbows to the side of the head and knees in the clinch and these moments that are going to happen in the fight, I trust Ismail Nurdiev to win this fight. So 8-2 Ryan Loder, 24-8 Ismail Nurdiev. He's lost a lot of fights. Listen, I think he had a tough one with Court McGee at one point when he first got to the UFC, and he was very young back then. I think he's still only 29 now, years later, when he's making his re-entrance into the UFC. But there were moments against Park In-young where I think, yeah, you can change the way of pressuring and grappling against you in order to get damage off. And I'm going to go with Ismail Nurdiev to beat Ryan Loder here. I think he's going to be a grueling fight, but I think Nurdiev's going to do more damage and probably get a finish in the second round or the third round. I'm going with Ismail Nurdiev to win this one by finish, by TKO in the second half of the fight. We move on. Bekzat Almakhan versus Alejandro Topuria. Am I wrong to say I'm not going to believe in the hype? I'm not going to believe in the hype of Alejandro Topuria. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I wasn't too much of a believer at first, in a way where I thought maybe on full camp, Colby Thickness could beat him. But on short notice, I just think I'm going to go with Alejandro Topuria. And did he clip farm? He did. He was weaving. He had good head movement. He was landing some big shots. He had a suplex. But in between all of that, I wasn't all that impressed by Alejandro Topuria's debut. you can watch back the fight via a YouTube short and see like, oh my God, he kind of resembles Ilya in his game, and that means he's going to be a world champion, and Alejandro's coming for everyone. And maybe if he was fighting a lesser opponent, I would... But Bekzat Almakhan's no fucking joke, man. Dropped Umar in his debut, had some great scrambles against him, went 3 rounds against Umar on short notice in his debut. And I like that. He's got experience over Alejandro Topuria. He's got he's got twice the experience of Alejandro Topuria. He beat some solid guys on the regional scene as well. He's very fast. He's very explosive. He's got good scrambles. And I'm going to say it, he's better than Colby Thickness. And I think that can give Topuria some real problems when all the pressure's on him now at this point. He wins his debut. Now there's like pressure to deliver. Ilya's going to be in the crowd. He's going to be there with him. So I'm actually going to go with Bekzat Almakhan. The odds are even here. And I think that's why, even though there's so much hype on Alejandro Topuria, I'm going to have to go with Bekzat Almakhan. I don't see Alejandro being able to out-grapple him too much. He might get a suplex, but he's not going to control him and hold him down, in my opinion. Umar was getting dominant position over him, and he was finding ways to buck out and scramble out of it. And again, dropped Umar in round 1. He's a powerful dude, this guy. And he did better against Umar than like a Raoni Barcelos and some proper good guys in the bantamweight division. So I'm going to go with Bekzat Almakhan here. I'm going to take Bekzat Almakhan. And it's, again, the Colby Thickness situation was, he was like a touted prospect. He's like, oh, he's Volk's guy. He's going to be really good because he's Volk's guy. And he might still go on to be quite good. But I thought the guy that he fought in his last fight, Musasa or something like that, was really, really bad. And Thickness looked fucking awful against him on the feet. I still haven't heard if there was some kind of injury going on there with Colby Thickness. But Thickness had a really decent 3rd round against Topuria, and he made the rounds competitive, and it was like a fight where even though Topuria won, you were like, but Thickness is going to be something, and it turns out, I doubt it, you know? Even though he won that fight against Musasa, it was tricky on the feet, big time. So I'm going to go with Bekzat Almakhan. I think he's better than Colby Thickness. I think he's comfortably better than Colby Thickness, and I think if you're slightly better than Colby Thickness, you could make it really close with Alejandro Topuria, and if you're comfortably better, you can edge out a win over Alejandro Topuria. So I'm actually going to go with Bekzat Almakhan by finish. I'm going to say that he finishes Alejandro Topuria and shuts down the hype. And that's one of the big moments on the prelims of this card. I'm going with Bekzat Almakhan getting this one done by TKO victory. We move on. Who the fuck are these guys? Oh, okay. Abdulrahman Yakayev versus Rafael Kakera. I don't know why. I'm actually going to be very brief with this, okay? I have no idea why they're still allowing Rafael Kakera to compete in the UFC. This is disastrous. I know he had a decent record outside the UFC, but he does nothing but back up and get KO'd in the 1st round. He is a victim in the cage. I'm just being real with you guys here. He gets hit once, and he covers up against the cage. He had some, like, he's an athletic guy, and at a certain point, he was fighting some heavyweights that were fat, and he was able to knock them out by being way technically better than them. But I can't trust Rafael Kakera to win a fight in a cage. Based on what I've seen so far against... I know Modestas is good. And I know that... is Ibo Aslam really good, though? I don't know if he is. I don't think he is at all, actually. So I'm going to go with Abdulrahman Yakayev. He looked good on the Contender Series. And I'm going to say that he finishes Rafael Kakera in the 1st round, just to go along with the trend of Rafael Kakera getting finished in the 1st round. He's a fighter that's going to have to tell me otherwise before I start picking him to win. So I'm going to have to see him win this fight first before I ever consider him winning a fight in the UFC. Really stinky performances so far. And plus, Abdul's got some reach on him. I don't know why they're measuring it in 3/4 inches here. But he's got a 78 3/4 of inch. And I think he's going to do well against Kakera here. I think he's going to catch him early or in the 2nd round and put him down by TKO. I think he's a decent prospect, undefeated. So I'm going to go with Abdulrahman Yakayev. This one actually wasn't on the thing that I was looking at, so it's always nice for a little surprise to test my knowledge real quick. That's funny. We move on. Nicholas Dalby versus Sajid Isgakmayev. I'm going with Sajid Isgakmayev here, or Isgakmayev. Massive, great, ONE FC fighter. Hasn't fought in a couple of years. Had a grappling match recently. He's got a ton of armbar submissions and stuff like that. So he's got a wicked submission game. And he's got a really good grappling game. And I know that's not really trustworthy enough to take him to beat a Nicholas Dalby. But Dalby at this point, you know, he's been slept by Randy Brown really badly in his last one. And had his nose shattered as well. And I know he had a decent performance against Renat Fakretinov. But I think Sajid's really good. Very, very good. I know he beat a Asian fighting legend in his last fight. I almost want to look up the name right now on my phone because it's someone that I should know the name of, completely should know the name of. And he knocked him out in the first round. It was a layup for him, though. So I'm not going to focus on it too much, but give me a second here. But yeah, he had a really nasty first round KO over the guy. And at 1FC, he had a ton of experience against like a ton of decent fighters. But the problem is with 1FC, and Reina de Ridder had this same problem, is that they don't have enough talent on the roster to keep these guys busy. So eventually they end up just sort of not fighting for ages. And now you've got this guy in Sajid coming into the UFC in his prime. I think he's 31 years of age. And he beat Shinya Aoki by KO brutally in the first round. Won a grappling match against a Dagestani dude. Fought some really experienced guys. 12-2, 33-11. Wins them pretty easily. Got a lot of submissions over them. Beat Maxim Baturin. I mean, he's got a bunch of great wins over some decent grapplers as well. And he's been doing it for a long time. There was a time when he was undefeated. He runs into good comp. He's got a ton of experience, ton of decisions. He's been in grueling matchups. I've seen a few of them. I just wanted to know that he beat Shinya Aoki, a legend of the game. But he was older and he kind of got laid up to Sajid because he couldn't get an opponent. And he slept him in like a minute and a half and finished him. So I'm going to go with Sajid at this point. If it was like Dalby fresh off the Renat Fakretinov performance, maybe I'd consider otherwise. But Sajid's been to a decision. This is the thing. Gabriel Bonfirm was a finisher. He took you down, subbed you in round one, or he got a TKO over you. And Dalby showed him the later rounds of a fight, and then he kind of came undone in that performance. Whereas with Sajid, he's been to a decision a bunch of times, and he's had grueling matches where they've won a round and he's had to pull it back. And I just think that's too much for Dalby at his age at this point in his career. So I'm going to go with Sajid is Gakhmayev in this matchup. I'm going to say that he wins this one by decision, 29-28. And he's coming into his prime after a bunch of time off. I think he's going to be better than ever. So that's even more chance to reinforce my pick of Sajid is Gakhmayev. We move on. Bogdan Grad versus Luke Riley. Another one out of Next Gen. They got to update the pictures on this. It's a bit disrespectful, I'll be honest with you guys, if I had to say so myself. But I'm going to go with Luke Riley. I'm going to go with Luke Riley here. But I do think this is trickier than it seems. Luke Riley's got a ton of hype on him. I've been hyping him up. I've been hyping up all the Next Gen guys. I hype up a bunch of people out of the UK. It's my thing. Yeah, I'm saying I just like hyping up the UK fighters, guys. What can I do? Luke Riley, though. This is tricky. I think he'll win. I think he'll be a bit too big for Bogdan Grad. And I think this is going to be a situation where Bogdan Grad, I saw it in the fight with Naimov. He got caught in the clinch a lot of times. And I don't think he's going to be good enough at range to deal with Luke Riley's stand-up. I think if he plays at range in the striking, he's going to get pieced the fuck up by Luke Riley. That's my take on this. And Riley's been putting in some power in his shots recently. He's looking better and better. There was a time where he was fighting some guy. I think he fought Loof, an undefeated prospect at the time. And I was thinking, God, he keeps getting wobbled. This is going to be worrying. There's a lot of hype on him and he's really fun. But in order to be really fun to watch, it kind of has to be back and forth. If you know what I'm saying? Like it kind of has to be, wow, that was a really fun fight. Why was it fun? Because they both did well. You know, they both had moments. And Riley would like come back from getting wobbled and go on to finish someone in the third round and then get wobbled again badly but survive it. So he's definitely not indestructible from what we've seen, but he still goes on to win. This is the thing about Luke Riley. So he'll have this trouble and he'll still push forward to win. So he's got the heart. He's got the grit. But recently he's been like dominating and he's been finishing early. And it's like, seems like there's this different level of his game. And now he's in the UFC. I think there's going to be that next. And he's known it for a while. So I think there's going to be that next part of his game where he's proper on it for this one. And Bogdan Grad's good though, man. When I first saw this, I thought, oh, Bogdan Grad, that's a great debut for him. But Bogdan Grad showed all right skills against Naimov, who is a good featherweight, who's a solid featherweight. Even though I said, and he's had some good wins. You know, he cheated the fuck out of Nathaniel Wood fight badly. But Naimov's good, and he's good at grappling, and Bogdan Grad was getting held up against the cage, and I think he landed a wheel kick on him at some point on the feet, but it was a really, like, low output, nothingness kind of fight. But I'm going to go with Luke Riley here. I can see a lot of moments when we're in the clinch, and I think Riley in the very close range in the pocket is where he's almost better. It's also a dangerous part of the game to be in there, but his grappling defense has gotten better. His cardio's really good for 3 rounds. That much I know. He can push a really good pace on people. He rips the body really well. He's good at range and in the pocket, as I said. And I think that's where we're going to see this. Against Bogdan Grad, the fight sort of stalled out in moments into both of them in over-unders in the clinch and each taking turns on each other up against the cage. Pause. But I think Luke Riley is going to be able to rip the body shots up against the cage here on Bogdan Grad. So I think it's going to be a striking match. I think Grad's going to throw some goofy shit, like big flicking head kicks, fucking wheel kicks, and all of this type of stuff. Go for some dynamic stuff, big shots over the top. Maybe there's going to be some danger early. But I think once they settle into this fight past round 1, I'll be much more confident in Luke Riley getting this done. So I'm going to go with Luke Riley getting this one done by 3rd round TKO, late in the 2nd round TKO maybe. I just think once it settles in and they're both going back and forth and it's getting into a bit of a scrap, that's where Riley's going to be finding the body shots in between. That's going to start breaking down Grad. He'll be stuffing the takedown, letting him back up, smoking him to the body again some more. So I'm going to go with Luke Riley by 2nd or 3rd round TKO over Bogdan Grad. That's my read on this. But Grad is dangerous. He's better than you think. 15-3. Yeah. Arguably could have beaten Naimov, I think, if I remember that fight correctly. So I'm going to go with Luke Riley. But there is danger early here. This isn't like a layup for a star in the making in his debut. This is like, okay, a decent test to see where he's at. But I think he'll pass it. Not with flying colours, but with some flair later on. 2nd or 3rd round TKO. We move on. Alex Perez versus Asu Almabayev. I'm going to go with Asu Almabayev here over Alex Perez. I never know where Alex Perez is at in his career, to be honest with you guys. But he is a decently big dude for the division. And he has given... I'm going to go with Asu Almabayev. He's proven me wrong so many times, like very well. Very dominantly with his grappling, and his striking's pretty good. He'll throw a wheel kick, and he's comfortable on the feet as well. It's not just that he's a wet blanket guy. He's very comfortable on the feet as well. And I thought I was onto something with the Ochoa pick against him, you know? Because Ochoa looked good against Lona Kavanagh or something. But then I was like, but maybe Lona Kavanagh's not the best. Maybe Johnson's going to KO him as the fight goes on. And then Johnson KOs him. I was like, yeah, he is a bit not the best as the fight goes on. And that kind of like changed my opinion about the whole thing. So I'm going to go with Asu Almabayev here against Alex Perez. He's got a lot of experience. He's been held back a bit in his career. He's had some stinkers. He has had some stinkers, but he's beat some good guys and he's got KO power. And it's just big moments. He slows down the fights into small moments. And not a lot happens. There's rarely ever like a crazy all-out brawl with Asu Almabayev versus someone. But he always manages to like get the back at the end of the round, shoot a good takedown at the end of the round, wobble someone and land some big shots at the end of the round, get a flash knockdown in a moment of the fight as well. And with Perez, it's just his inactivity concerns me at this point. You know, even though he did look good against Makayev, I think Makayev's massively improved since then, and he still lost. Although there's arguments to be made. You know what I mean? There was a position separated due to an illegal knee and this type of situation, but I just think Perez is not going to be able to stop everything that Almabayev does. He's either going to have to choose to stop the takedowns or he's going to have to choose to stop the wildness on the feet. But paired together, I don't think Perez will handle it. So I'm going to go with Asu Almabayev getting this one done. I'm going to agree with the majority of people here and go with Asu Almabayev getting this done by decision, 29-28. One of them's a close round. One of them's competitive. The other one's clear. Asu Almabayev gets this one done by decision. We move on. Tagir Ulanbekov versus Kyoji Horiguchi. Wow, what an odd-looking guy on the right. I'm just keeping it real. I'm going to go with Tagir. Again here, I'm going to go with Tagir. He's an odd one. Tagir. You know? Because he has some close fights with people that I don't really think he should be having close fights against. But Kyoji Horiguchi, it's hard to say that someone coming into the UFC from outside the UFC is going to... I really want to pick Kyoji Horiguchi, but I'm having trouble committing to it. He's so experienced and good, and Tagir has been making it very close in his own career recently, with a bunch of tricky decisions. And then the Tim Elliott fight, even though Tim Elliott hooked the glove, he still was doing very well against him in that fight. I just worry about the size of Tagir. He's massive for the division, you know, and he's got a lot of reach for the division as well. But Kyoji is a very experienced veteran, and he's seen the bright lights before. And he beat fucking... He beat Sergio Pettis, you know? And he beat... It's almost fucking annoying because I want to be able to pick against Dagestanis now, but I feel like I fucking can't. You know what I mean? Otherwise, the bias is shown through again, dude. But I do want to go with Kyoji Horiguchi here. I think I'm going to go with Kyoji Horiguchi. Beat Sergio Pettis, beat Nakimaru Zuli. He's beaten good fighters outside the UFC. And he's doing well against them. I know he got caught with like a spinning back fist at one point by Pettis after doing really well against him beforehand. These are very well-trained fighters that Tagir would probably take to a close split decision. So I'm actually going to go with Kyoji Horiguchi winning his return to the UFC against Tagir Ulanbekov by close 29-28 decision. Because Tagir, even though he's good, he has been fighting kind of like untested, up-and-coming guys in moments. You know? Whereas, like, okay, you did well against, what's his name? Not Carpenter, but something along those lines. And he had a pretty close fight with him, and he wins it on certain moments, and the strike output's pretty low. I just don't see him, like, craftily getting by close 29-28 decision against a guy like Kyoji Horiguchi, who's finally back in the UFC. So I'm going to go with Horiguchi getting this one done in his return to the UFC. I think he's going to win this one by decision over Tagir Ulanbekov here. Mixing in the striking, mixing in the grappling. And his grappling is very good. And Tagir has been taken down. It's not like he's immune to it, you know. So I'm going to go with Horiguchi. Very experienced, maybe too experienced and crafty for Tagir Ulanbekov. We move on. Oh, God. Sergey Spivak versus Shamil the Blob Gaziev. Dude, he's blobbing out on the right side of the screen. I'm going with Shamil Gaziev. You got to go with Shamil Gaziev here, I feel like. Sergey Spivak is... His performance against Waldo Cortez Acosta does change my mind a little bit. He had a very close fight with Acosta. And Acosta's pretty good at heavyweight. Like, he's a pretty decent fighter. And he can beat good guys. He's got power in his hands. He's pretty tricky as well on the back foot and kind of elusive. And, you know, Salsa Boy, he moves well on the back foot. But Shamil Gaziev is very good. Very good. He's deceptively very good based on the prototype of heavyweight that he represents. So I'm going to go with Shamil Gaziev here. I think he's going to win a sort of 50-50 fight with Sergey Spivak. And maybe Spivak could submit him. But I think Shamil has weird urgency out of nowhere sometimes in his game where he will be taken down and he'll pop right back up. But he's tough and he pushes a good pace. And I don't think Spivak's got the striking to give him much problems. And I don't think Spivak's going to just ragdoll him on the ground either. So I'm going to go with Shamil Gaziev here. Maybe there's going to be a lot of clinching in this fight. But he's going to have a bit of size over Spivak. He's going to have some strength over Spivak. And I think maybe Spivak will chew up his leg in moments. But I'm going to go with Gaziev landing some good shots on the chin. It's just with Spivak, his striking has never looked comfortable. Whereas with Gaziev, he will put some mitts on people here and there. This might be a bit too much of a jump up for him, though, and maybe I'm falling into the myth of the legacy of the Blob. But I'm going to go with Shamil Gaziev. I'm going to go with Shamil the Blob Gaziev, pulling this one off. 29-28. Close decision. They're blobbing back and forth. And I'm going to go with Shamil Gaziev getting this one done. He did have a close fight with Bidet, though, right? Like a really uneventful performance when they were against the cage. Or no, was it... I think it was he had a really shitty performance against Dontel Mays where there was a lot of cage stuff going on. But I just can't trust in Spivak to win, man. He just seems too beatable. When pressure gets put on him, he does seem to just sort of like cover up behind his guard. And Shamil Gaziev does very well by putting on pressure people and barraging them while they try and hide behind their guard. So I think that's where he's going to do well here. So I'm going to go with Shamil Gaziev getting this one done by decision. I think it's going to be close. I think Spivak will have some moments, but Gaziev will be undeniable as the fight goes on. We move on. Jack Hermansson versus Mike Takbek Oroblai. We've been talking about lighter man skill for a very long time. This is Mike Takbek Oroblai. This is his fight. He's way lighter. And they're going to be around the same weight anyway. But Hermansson's trying to make it down to welterweight with a massive weight cut after getting flatline KO'd against Gregory Rodriguez at middleweight. I mean, doesn't it almost feel like sometimes when the unks make these decisions, it's not to like, I'm going to go on a run for a title at welterweight. It's almost like Jack Hermansson decided, I want to be a bit leaner. Just in general in life. Like, I want to be a bit leaner and not have all of this muscle on me as much. And I want to trim down a little bit. So you know what? Maybe my next fight will be at welterweight. It feels more like that's what's going on with Jack Hermansson. Whereas Takbek Oroblai, I think I like his move up to welterweight. Lighter man skill. And this is going to be 2 divisions apart, you know? People are already talking about how Makhachev would beat these fucking middleweight guys now. I believe in lighter man skill. There's so many examples of it being proven recently where the lighter guy comes up and beats the bigger guy. Does it work with someone way bigger? Because Hermansson is going to have some size on him. And he's going to have some reach. And he can be crafty. But I think Takbek Oroblai is going to be a little bit too snappy and sharp and technical for Jack Hermansson. You know, Pfeiffer's good, but he's a bit of a swinger. You know what I mean? And Hermansson could sort of outcrafty him on the back foot with low kicks. So I'm going to go with Takbek Oroblai, and I don't think he's going to get out-grappled by Hermansson. He's very good at getting back to his feet, very good at being offensive in the grappling as well. He even beat Uros Medic in his debut on short notice, and Uros has looked really good at welterweight now, like really big and powerful, and he had Mike Takbek in trouble at one point, but he's a massive guy. And Mike Takbek put the smush on him and finished him. So I'm going to go with Mike Takbek Oroblai beating Jack Hermansson. I just think it's too much for Jack, and I don't like this at Jack's career. At the point of his career right now, coming off a KO loss, looking to change things up like this, I'm going to have to go with Mike Takbek Oroblai getting this one done. We move on. Volkan Ozdemir versus Alonzo Menifield. I'm going with Volkan Ozdemir. Menifield has had some fights against Umar Sy and against other fighters. Even the Crute fights got a little bit back and forth. I don't think Ozdemir has anything to worry about on the takedown department. And you have to be pretty fucking good to beat Ozdemir, man. You do have to be really good. And Menifield at times can be pretty shitty with his decision making. And Ozdemir is good at like moving and staying out of danger and low kicking well. And he beat Bogdan Guskov in his debut. And Guskov's very good. And Ozdemir stayed in there with him. And when he gets hit with a big shot, he keeps his composure. So I just think this is a little bit too much of an experienced vet for Alonzo Menifield to get by with his power. And he is powerful. He does have power in his punches. He has KO'd a lot of guys and put them down. And he's strong as well in certain positions. But I don't think he's going to be able to get takedowns on Volkan Ozdemir. Ozdemir's got a lot of leg strength, a lot of hip strength. You try and get it on his hips, he'll shuck you off unless you're Daniel Cormier, I guess, in his prime. But then as this fight goes on, again, if they get past the first round and Ozdemir's still there, he's going to put mustard on Alonzo Menifield. He's going to be peppering him with a jab and moving and countering and getting in there, low kick, move, kick to the body, jab, jab, move. It's just too much, whereas Menifield's sort of like an in-the-moment fighter. He fights in spurts. And Ozdemir's lost to, what, Yuri? He's been KO'd. He's a little bit inactive recently in his career. But I'm going to go with Ozdemir. I think Ozdemir's too crafty, too good, moves around well. Better than Jimmy Crute by far. I think Crute was a little bit of a vulnerable guy against Alonzo Menifield in their fight, and still Menifield in moments did struggle to get rid of him in their fights, and Crute was able to sort of stumble his way through with like stepping on Lego technique and the palsy technique that Crute had in those fights for them to still be somewhat interesting, even though one of them he was finished. It just speaks to me that if someone else can sort of get on Menifield like that and make him go a bit further. Menifield beat Umar Sy, didn't he? He didn't do enough in that fight or some shit. But Umar Sy gave him problems in that fight is what I meant with the movement and the striking. I just think Özdemir's too experienced, man. He's not going to fear a KO puncher. He's got power himself. In fact, I can see an Özdemir KO the more I think about this. I can see an Özdemir TKO win. It's not like Manyfield's, got the best chin in the world. He can be put down as well as he swings for punches. So I'm going to go with Volkan Özdemir. I think he'll sting Alonzo Manyfield with hooks on the outside. Özdemir is routinely a problem for inexperienced guys that don't have a well-rounded game and aren't like elite in any single area. So even though Alonzo Manyfield's a great athlete and powerful, I'm going to trust in Özdemir to get this one done. I'm going to say he finishes him in the second round by TKO, in my opinion. Volkan Özdemir, second round TKO. And he can grapple. He can shoot in himself and get takedowns. So definitely going with Volkan Özdemir, second round TKO. We move on. Belal Muhammad versus Ian Machado Garry. These are the big ones that people care about. The aura is gone. The aura is gone, man. And Ian Garry is just, look. This guy looks more dangerous than I ever thought before, I used to think, Garry, what a bitch, dude. That's what I used to think about Ian Garry on the come-up in moments. But now I'm like, dude, he fucking neutralized Prates for 4 rounds. I know he got caught in the 5th. And he was in a lot of trouble. But he didn't lose. If he lost, maybe... I don't even think that would apply to this matchup anyway, but... Ian Garry's got really good takedown defense. And I used to think that JDM had like elite level takedown defense because he stuffed the takedowns of Belal Muhammad really easily. And even though people say, Belal wasn't trying to take him down, Belal tried to make it a fun fight for the fans and all of this type of stuff, I completely disagree. He shot the same amount of takedowns that he always does. He just didn't shoot them immediately like he did on Leon because Leon's a good guy to just pressure backwards and go for. Garry moves so well. They're in the big cage. It's not 5 a.m. in the UK. It's going to be a good time for both of them. So I'm going to go with Ian Garry. I'm going to go with Ian Garry getting this one done, peppering up Belal Muhammad, and outstriking him on the feet. I think this is going to be a bad look for Belal. I think it's going to be another Leon Edwards moment where we're like, this guy was the champ of the division. I fear the same thing for JDM in this division. And I'm a big JDM fan, but with like Prates and Morales coming up, it seems like the big, tall-framed welterweights. This is the new meta at welterweight. And man, Ian Garry's good. And Shavkat was trying to get him down and ended up just having to sort of like hold him against the cage instead as like a bit of a cope in moments of that fight. And he would land a big shot on Garry and then hold him up against the cage. And even MVP... Garry won that fight. I know he didn't look good while doing it. And on the feet, he looked really bad. And I think the big problem with Garry there was that he was saying he's just the best striker. And MVP really made it so that he couldn't really land anything on him on the feet, But Ian Garry showed his grappling chops there. Nearly subbed MVP in round 1. Took him down at the end of round 3 in a very close round. I think he had 2 takedowns in round 3 in that fight. And he had the back of MVP at the end of the round, landed a couple of shots, won the fight by decision, even though he had a really bad second round. I did get caught up in how annoying of a cunt Ian Garry is, And he was saying things like, I landed whatever I wanted out there. I remember I landed a punch on MVP and I saw his eyes roll back in his head. Like, Ian Garry does just make shit up, but you need to be delusional to be good in this game. And that's going to help. And he's going to feel like this is his moment, Everyone else is kind of one fight away from a title. There's not really anyone for Makhachev right now. If he goes out there, beats Belal Muhammad impressively and gets on the mic and calls out Islam Makhachev, I think he finishes Belal. I think he's going to get a TKO over Belal Muhammad. Belal's striking's not going to work on a tall, lanky guy like Ian Garry. It's all right off the shoulder. 1-1, 2-1. Tries to pour volume on people. I don't think he's going to pour volume on Ian Garry here. I don't see him pouring volume on Ian Garry and backing him up and getting combos off. That seems to happen to people that are a little bit shorter than him, or Leon Edwards, where you can do that to him if you just pressure like Brady did and back him up. So I'm going to go with Ian Garry. Knees up the middle, stomps on the leg of Belal. And it comes down to the same thing. In hindsight, who has Belal beaten? At this point in the game, because it's all about at this point. Who has he beaten at this point in the game you think, wow, Ian Garry has MVP. He has Carlos Prates. He does have the Rakhmonov performance. Even though he lost the fight, he does have the Rakhmonov performance that he had. And then you have Belal Muhammad. And you think, yeah, you beat Wonder Boy with your grappling. And you beat Gilbert Burns in a shitty fight over 5 rounds where both of you took it on short notice. And you beat Leon Edwards, right? Brady's a good win. That is a good win. I agree that's a good win. I just think Belal was a really good counter grappler. Like, he can't be taken down. And if you don't move enough, and if you don't have the power to get respect from him on the back foot, then you're not going to have a good time against him because he can be a bully. I mean, he calls himself Belal the Bully Muhammad. So he is that is his style. I'm going to go with Ian Garry. Palestine Island. I can see Ian Garry having a bit of a moment for Palestine afterwards. You know, the Irish love him. So he'll have that kind of like sort of Paul Hughes moment on the mic maybe. And I think he's going to call out Makhachev. I can just see it aligning. And then Makhachev Garry is McGregor Khabib part 2. Even though they're both not the same. Makhachev might be a fucking better version of Khabib. And Ian Garry, I don't know if he's a better version of McGregor yet, but he's definitely a larger, more interesting kind of matchup for Makhachev type of version of McGregor. So I can see that being formed. I can see that being talked about as the next fight. Whereas with Belal, do you see Ian Garry floating around stinging up Belal on the feet? Yes. Do you see Belal stinging up Ian Garry on the feet? Fucking no. Could you see Ian Garry KOing Belal Muhammad? Yes. Could you see Belal Muhammad KOing Ian Garry? Fucking no. Do you think Belal Muhammad's going to take down Ian Garry and smush him on the ground? No. No, I don't see that. This is the thing you have to start doing with these fights. Same thing that I did with Edwards Prates when I picked that fight. Sure, you can go down to like, well, there's this part of their style and that part of their style. And sometimes you get lost in that and you end up picking an underdog and being like, well, the change of divisions could... Sometimes you don't know how a change of a division's going to go. But with Belal versus Ian Garry, it's just about, what do I actually see happening here? What could happen here? And I can very easily see Ian Garry stinging him up, moving well on the back foot, chewing up his legs, stomping on his leg, hitting him to the body with kicks, combinations moving forward, in and out movement, moving around. And this is the thing with Ian Garry in this matchup. The Shavkat Rakhmonov fight was on short notice. The Carlos Prates fight was on short notice. And he still looked good. And it's a 5-round bout. I like full camp Ian Garry here. Full camp Ian Garry is going to win this fight by TKO in round 3 or 4. And I think it's going to be a moment where Belal's busted up and he says, you know what, I had my time. Maybe. So I'm going to go with Ian Garry stinging up Belal. And Belari. Ian Garry actually has pretty short arms for his height, but he's going to have reach over Belal here. Belal's got like a long-armed featherweight's reach at 72 inches of reach. So I'm going to go with Ian Garry peppering him up and moving around him. And showing him levels of striking that he ain't seen, to be honest with you. You know? I'm going to go with Ian Garry. That's it. 3rd round TKO. 3rd round TKO. Maybe combinations. Knee hits Belal as he goes in for a takedown. Garry scrambles it, punches him up a bit, lets him back up. Stings him on the feet even more. I think he's going to set up like a nasty TKO finish in round 3. Hit the strut. Call out Islam Makhachev, set up the title fight next against Makhachev. That's what's going to happen here. We move on. Arman Tsarukyan versus Dan the Hangman Hooker. This is another painful one because Dan Hooker is one of my favorite fighters in the UFC. But I'm going to go with Arman Tsarukyan here over Dan Hooker. I do think Dan Hooker's being underrated here because even though people say, the Gamrot fight was a robbery, it was a close fight that could have gone either way, really. Do I think Gamrot could have won? And if Gamrot had Ov at the end of his name, he probably would have won based on the control time that he had. Let's just call it what it is. But Dan Hooker's really good at, like, stuffing He's a lot better at it than he was before when it comes to scrambling up from takedowns. But also with Gamrot, let me know if you think this is correct or not. Gamrot is really good at, like, pushing a pace of takedowns on someone that will get back up and then be taken down again and get back up and be taken down again. But when Gamrot actually gets someone on the ground, it's almost better for the fighter on the ground. Because it's not like Gamrot has really nasty ground and pound. It's not like Gamrot takes mount. It's not like Gamrot lands vicious elbows on top. He's shown it against Ludovic Klein in some moments, who's a pure striker in the division. And also has a bit of a questionable gas tank. I know in the third round he had a reason against Rebecki, but in general, his gas tank has always been a bit sus, even against Nate Lamb, where he completely gassed and got subbed in like round 2. But I just think Arman is going to do big things with his dominant position. If you look at the way Arman, even though Gamrot out-wrestled Arman in their fight, Arman won that fight. You watch it back, you know Arman won that fight. But if you look at the way Arman was on the ground with Oliveira compared to Gamrot, it's almost like Gamrot got the takedown on Oliveira, and it was like, oh, this is bad for Gamrot. This is terrible for Gamrot that he got a takedown on Oliveira. Now he's stuck in these awkward positions. And even against Garam Kutateledze, who's not got the best grappling in the world, it was the same thing for Gamrot earlier in his career. Whereas Arman, even though I don't think he's as good as in a wrestling match, he would lose to Gamrot. I think that's the truth. In a proper, I think he's better at implementing dominant positions on top. And Gamrot had them a lot on Dan Hooker in their fight. And Hooker just broke his arm again, twice. Right? 2 broken arms back to back. Coming back into this one, if he wins, you can think about a title shot maybe, if he makes the right call out. And he's a big name, and he's big, and he's tall, and he's got reach, and maybe he sets up the knee on Arman. And Arman has had some stinkers. Arman had the Joaquim Silva performance where it wasn't the best. He got wobbled. But I think he's going to be able to take down Dan Hooker. And I don't think he's as lost on the feet as we suggest. And I think he's actually going to finish him in round 2 or 3 from the mount with ground and pound. That's where I think Arman's better than Gamrot at with the grappling, is taking a dominant position and actually doing something with it. And even on Oliveira, that's how he won that fight. Even though Oliveira nearly had a Darce choke at the end of the third and nearly had a Darce choke at the end of the third, nearly had a triangle at the end of the second, nearly had a guillotine in round 1. All of this nearly saved by the bell conversations that you can have. But in that fight, Arman was stacking over the top of Oliveira and smashing him on the ground with some decent ground and pound. And that's the difference here. So I think that if he does get on top of Dan Hooker, he will cause a ton of damage. It's a 5-rounder, which I don't think favors Dan Hooker. I think Arman's going to push a better pace. And there is something to be said about the fact that he gave Makhachev the toughest grappling exchanges that we've seen in his career. Even though Volk had moments, he still had his back taken for a whole round. Arman gave Makhachev the toughest grappling exchanges in his career at 23 years old, and he's only getting better, and he's had all this time off. Maybe he could be rusty. I doubt it. I think he's going to come in improved, looking really good. I think you've got to be short, stocky, and powerful to give Arman problems. And that's why Joaquim Silva gave him problems. I think that's where Ilya will beat Arman. But I think he'll beat Dan Hooker very comfortably. So I'm going to say 2nd or 3rd round, mount, ground and pound TKO from Arman. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Toodle pip. I'll see you later. Goodbye.